And welcome everybody for this. It'll be a combination of formal and informal. I think we've got few enough people here just for the purpose of it being like us all being together in a room. I'm just going to go down the line and hit allow to talk for everybody, just so that we don't have any quorum issues to worry about. And it'll be much more congenial, let's say, for us all to be able to be in the room together. No pressure for anybody to actually say anything or turn your camera on or whatnot, but I just wanted to go ahead and do this. There's Vadim. Hi, welcome, Vadim.
Good evening, everyone. Can you promote me? Am I?
I've allowed you to talk, and I can actually promote you. Let me disable talking, and then I'll promote you.
We'll be right back, Travis.
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome everybody as we get rolling here in the Q&A video. Yes, you'd like to turn your video on, Ron? Let me hold on. So those that I've done that, sorry, I don't know Zoom inside and out. So if you do want to turn your video on, it looks like I have to make you a panelist. So I'll do that. And when Ron comes back, so if you'd like to be able to have your video on, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll get you promoted. So Irene, okay, so let me do that. Disable talking. And then Irene, so you're going to accept when I say promote to panelist. There we go. All right. And let's see, Stephen Weinberg. Okay, we will do that. And so Stephen, you're going to get promoted now. Christy Holmes, I'm going to promote you. Okay. And let's see, Ron, did you make it back in? Not yet. Okay. Okay, so anyone else who'd like to go ahead?
I'm going to mute myself until I'm ready to talk again.
Okay, perfect. Welcome, Ron. Thanks. All right, so here we go. A few formalities here at the outset. The call to order. So I'm acting as the chair pro tem of this committee in order to keep us going and get back together in recognition of Chuck McGinnis's many years leading this committee. Wanted to make sure that we didn't drop the ball and to have a meeting and talk a little bit about leadership once we've had our presentation. For those who don't know me, my name is Travis Longcore. I'm the president of the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council. And our second item is the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag salute. And I think, Bob, do you have your flag?
Yes, I do.
There you go. Okay. So together, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Bob.
This flag has gotten more use in the last year than it has in the last 15.
There you go. Normally we would have a roll call here, but the thing is, there's nothing on the agenda that we have to take a vote. And so I'll just make a note of the folks who are here. And we'll put that in the minutes. Don't need to take a whole lot of time on it. Because our goal here, or my goal with putting this meeting together was to hear from David Shew, who is, as you will have read either in the announcement or the agenda, is an architect, started out as an architect, started working then as a seasonal firefighter for CAL FIRE. And then for the next, as he puts it, the next 31 years, he worked to combine these two forms of knowledge as he rose through the ranks of CAL FIRE from seasonal firefighter up to the state office of the fire marshal. He retired in 2018 as the staff chief for the Division of Planning and Risk Analysis. And so I think David knows as much or more about structure ignition and the risks that we face here in California from wildfire than pretty much anybody out there. And he's coming to us tonight from a meeting of a insurance industry working group, organization that deals with exactly these issues of fire and how it relates to our ability to get insured. And he's also led a team that did a important project for the city of Beverly Hills, looking at assessing their wildfire risk based on modeling that involved our territory, our neighborhoods, and looking how fire that might come from Bel Air, Beverly Crest and through Coldwater might be affecting places like Truesdale, et cetera. And they use some really innovative state-of-the-art modeling that I hope he's going to share a little bit with us tonight as well. I just wanted to thank Dave for volunteering to speak with us when I asked, saying yes, and welcome him. And we have a Q&A set up that you can put questions in. And I don't know if you'll see those or not while you're talking, Dave, but we'll make sure we get, we'll keep an eye on those. We've let anybody have their mic on if you'd like to. And we will also at the end take questions. So David, welcome. Thank you. As you know, this is a neighborhood council. We go all the way from the 405 freeway to Laurel Canyon Boulevard between Mulholland and Sunset. And so in that area, there's north of Sunset, Laurel Canyon, Franklin Canyon, Coldwater Canyon, Benedict Canyon, Beverly Glen Canyon, and all of Bel Air over to Sepulveda. And so I'm just delighted and looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here with all of you. And I guess what I came prepared to do and what I put together was a presentation that is going to talk a little about the California wildfire problem as I see it, and some of the prevention efforts that are going on to try to solve it. I will get into a little bit of a discussion about the Beverly Hills Wildfire Assessment Report and talk about that just a little, but primarily I'd like to leave time open for discussion and conversation at the end of it. So I am going to go through these slides fairly quickly, and there's a lot of information on it. As you know, I could spend a week sitting here talking to you about all this kind of stuff, but I'm going to keep it as short as I can so that we can ask questions. I don't think I can see the questions while they're being asked, okay. But if you have anything, if anybody does have a question that we would be worth discussing while I'm talking, I'm totally open to that. That's just fine. And we can answer questions and things like that as I go. But I do want to get through all of this, and I will make the presentation available to all of you. So you don't have to worry about taking copious notes. I'll have, I'll send it to Travis after we're done, and you folks can go ahead and have a copy of it to look at and study in more detail. So how's that sound?
That's perfect. And just so everybody knows, we'll put it on the minutes page of the Emergency Preparedness Committee after the meeting.
Okay. And do you need to allow me to share my screen?
If I've done it right, you should be able to. The share screen at the bottom.
Are you seeing my screen now?
No.
No.
Not yet.
All right, let's try to see. What do I, oh, here we go. More share screen.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. Here we go. Is that what everybody's seeing the title page here?
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll start out this by noting the date that we are doing this presentation on. Today is the 30th anniversary of the tunnel fire from 1991 that burned through the Oakland Hills. And so that's a pretty significant date. So it's a little ironic that we're talking about this subject on this particular date. So again, I'll just get started. And again, please feel free to interrupt if there's any questions that we need to discuss as we go. Travis went through a little bit of my background. You're right. I retired from CAL FIRE in 19. Wow, that dates me, huh? 2018. I was a staff chief at the State Fire Marshal's Office, which is the branch of CAL FIRE. I was overseeing the planning and risk analysis, which does the fire prevention programs across the state, such as defensible space inspections, land use planning. We also created what's called the DINS program for damage inspection. We'll talk about that a little bit. That's collecting data from structures that have been destroyed by wildfires. I was on one of the incident management teams for 11 years, acting as a public information officer. I served as the Napa County Fire Marshal for a number of years and just went through 31 years of firefighting and large-scale management. So I have seen a lot of fires. I've been to fires all over the state. And once I retired, I just wasn't willing to walk away from it. I live in Napa. And as you probably all well know, we have been hit by some really devastating fires up there. And while my neighborhood has been okay, I know lots and lots of people who haven't been so fortunate. And so I just wanted to stay involved and try to help solve the problem. And that's what I'm doing today. So this presentation is going to be focused on providing you some background and information on why things have gotten the way they are. I mean, this didn't happen just by accident. There's some background and history to describe and explain why the wildfire situation has reached the way it is. And so as we start discussing this, we're going to talk about the fire problem, prevention activities that are currently going on. We're going to talk about some of those efforts and some of the success stories that have been identified. But we also have to, get that reality check with some of the statistical analysis, some of it, which is a little sobering. But I think we need to be very blunt about this problem, at this time of this situation. And really, it's almost like, where's that magic silver bullet to solve all of this? Well, there isn't one silver bullet. There's a lot of things that are going to have to come together to make it all successful. And, why is that so elusive? And we'll talk all about that. We're going to talk about the prevention, the science, the research behind that is going on right now, and then also wrap it up with talking a little bit about the Beverly Hills Assessment Report, which is online on the Beverly Hills website. So it's publicly available for anyone who would like to read it. So as we get started here, I want to make all of us agree on some assumptions that are present as we're getting into this. First, that California is simply a natural wildfire environment. Fire has been a natural part of the ecosystem here in California for millions of years. And so it's not the fact that this is suddenly a new problem. Fire has been around here for a long time. The problem is we didn't successfully learn to live with it for a long time. And now we're suffering some consequences from that, and we're going to talk about that. Second thing is those land management decisions and the human intervention of moving into fire-prone areas without considering how or where we built to be more successful during a wildfire environment has been very damaging to where we find ourselves today, and we'll talk a little bit about that. These decisions from land management and human intervention have resulted in a very unnatural environment. The vegetation out there is hugely overgrown over what it would normally have been several centuries ago. And that we recognize today, I think it's universally recognized that things have to change. The status that we find ourselves in, quite literally, is unacceptable, and we have to change things. But there's no real consensus amongst everybody on how we go about doing that. So that's kind of the turmoil we're in, is figuring out how is the best way to move forward. So let's quickly go through the fire problem. These are a series of photos that were all taken from the same location. It happens to be in Montana, but it just as easily could be someplace in the Sierra Nevadas, in California or many other places across the country for that matter. But you see over the period of almost 100 years, 70 years certainly, you can see from 1909 to 1979, the continued increasing growth of vegetation and trees that you see. And if you fast forward that 1979 picture and go back there and take a picture today in 2021, it would be even more dense than what you see there. So we've really added a lot of vegetation to the landscape. And that is one of the biggest contributing factors that when fire starts today, there simply is a lot more fuel for it to burn. And we see that playing out in all these big fires.
Yeah, Dave, can I just interject something here?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I mean, because this is a really interesting perspective in terms of the differences between the mountains in the middle of the northern part of the state versus here, where we
Yes.
predominantly have chaparral. I
Yes.
think that the overgrown piece, chaparral was always going to not get much bigger than it is right now, where our
Correct.
predominant vegetation, but certainly the forests and the coniferous forests in the state have undergone this transition, and they're kind of two different systems.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. And that's what's unique about California because of its size. Clearly we've got the redwoods, the sequoias, the chaparral, the desert landscape. There's lots and lots of different ecosystems that exist in California. But overall, because of climate change and warming temperatures and drier fuels, the fire problem has increased exponentially in every one of those fire regimes. So you're exactly right. The regimes are different, but their exposure and increase in fire behavior is true across the board. So yeah, thank you for adding that. Everybody knows Smokey Bear. I mean, I like to argue the fact that I think that the Smokey Bear campaign may have been one of the most successful ad campaigns ever in the history of the world. I think everybody knows Smokey and all that kind of thing, but there were some unintended consequences that came along with that. There were, there was the fact that a lot of people came to the belief that all fire was bad, that, preventing forest fires meant that maybe there should be no fire at all. And that really kind of damaged the perception of the value and the good benefits that fire is necessary on the landscape and can bring good value to the landscape. But that's part of what we're fighting today, is a lot of people think of fire as being a bad thing or the enemy, the accompanying smoke with it and all those kind of things. And that's another challenge that we're faced with trying to turn that around. The strategic fire plan for the state of California is one of the programs I oversaw. The State Board of Forestry and Fire Protection just updated that document. That was one of the final plans that I worked on in 2018 when they updated it. But this is just the motto of the fire plan: a vision for a natural environment that is more fire resilient, buildings and infrastructure that are more fire resistant, and a society that is more aware of and responsive to the benefits and threats of fire, all achieved through local, state, federal, tribal, and private partnerships. That is the vision of what California brings to the table to talk about the strategic fire plan. And essentially that's the guiding vision of how to learn to live with fire and not think of it as an enemy that we have to fight and beat back. So we want to learn how to be more resilient and resistant to wildfires while allowing them to continue to occur in their natural state as they did for millions of years. And again, like I said, that document was updated in 2018. The 8 goals of the fire plan are essentially consolidated into 3 main initiatives of planning, response, and prevention. So those are the big 3 of what the vision of the state fire plan is really about. But I mentioned earlier the drought and climate change issues, and these are very, very big factors. And I witnessed it myself. I'm the perfect guy who, when I started in the mid 1980s as a seasonal firefighter, I was witnessing timeframes of the quote unquote fire season from late spring, early summer through early to mid fall. In fact, most seasonal firefighters were laid off by October. Most of us weren't hired until May or June. And you had this short window basically where fires occurred, and they were never million-acre fires or things like that. But today, fire ignitions continue to increase above the normal 5-year averages. We'll look at a statistical chart from CAL FIRE. These large, devastating fires, and the list of them just keeps growing. The Valley and Butte fires from 2015, the Tubbs and Atlas fires, and the Woolsey fire, of course, all in 2017. The Thomas fire, actually, in December 2017, of all things. The Carr fire, the Mendocino complex, the Camp Fire, and now even this year, the Dixie fire and the Caldor fire. So these lists of fires just continue to grow. California, on average, responds to approximately 200 to 300 initial attack fires every week on average, but you never hear about most of them because about 95% or more of them are kept at 10 acres or less. And so that effort of active and aggressive fire suppression has been a contributing factor to removing fire from the environment, which again contributes to a more explosive growth of fire behavior when they do start. And again, we have longer fire seasons than in the West. And in fact, it's not even fair to call it a fire season any longer. It's a fire year. CAL FIRE and many other departments across the state respond to fires 12 months out of the year now. We really recognize that the status quo of the way we've always done things simply is never going to solve the problem and work. And we have to focus our efforts on prevention. We have to get proactive about it and stop being only reactive and responding to hope that we can put them out. Because, like I said, 95% or more of all the fires are kept at 10 acres or less. But those remaining 3, 4, 5% of the fires that are exploding into these mega catastrophic fires are really causing a lot of damage. And that's what we're trying to combat. So we're increasing our efforts and knowledge based on scientific knowledge. We also have the environmental effects of, this was the bark beetle infestation and the pine tree, basically largely the ponderosa pine forests that were largely killed off by the bark beetle to the tune of approximately 165 million dead trees across the landscape of the Sierra Nevadas. These photos that are taken are not photoshopped. And if you live in that house in the middle of all those dead trees, what are you going to do? How can you continue to survive in things like this? This is just a very quick comparison, looking again from the same spot, looking over about a 1.5 year period of how quickly the bark beetle took over and devastated the ponderosa pine forest in the western slopes of the Sierra Nevada. Those trees are not coming back. That is itself one of the contributing factors, because now you have all this standing dead timber that will be there for a long, long time. And those are, again, contributing factors to some of the catastrophic nature of fires that we're seeing today. I just picked this statistic. This is a statistic that is on the CAL FIRE website. They update this every Friday. And this is, I think, does it have the date? Yeah, updated last Friday, October 15th. So you can see what the 5-year average of ignitions are. The 5-year average of the number of fires is right around 7,500 fires per year up to this time, with approximately 1.29 million acres burned. But last year, we had almost 9,000 fires for over 4.1 million acres. And this year, we're again up to 8,100 fires with almost 2.5 million acres burned. So you can see that both the number of fires and the acreage that is being burned is far greater than what our 5-year average has been in the past. So those are consequences that we have to deal with. And of course, as we all know, California has always had large fires. It's not unusual, but they're getting worse. And if we look at the top 20 of the largest fires that are in recorded history in California, if you go through this list, and you've probably heard this on the news or something, but if you just look at the top 6, out of the top 6, The Mendocino complex in 2018 is the only one that did not occur either this year or last year. 5 of the top 6 occurred just in the last 2 years, and actually 9 of the top 20 have all occurred just in the last 2 years alone. And if we go to the most destructive wildfires in California history, we get another sobering statistic. 7 of the top 20 of the most destructive fires that have ever occurred have all occurred either this year or last year. That is a pretty sobering statistic. And the unfortunate part of it is, and I'm sad to admit this, but I'm going to say it anyway, there is no one out there who is suggesting that we have peaked and everything is going to start getting better. The complete worldwide agreement with all fire researchers across the planet right now agree that things are going to continue to get worse before they get better. So even with these very disturbing statistics, this might not be the worst. I'm going to show just a few examples of some of the historical fires. This is the California, the LNU complex that was burning on October 8th in 2017, just 4 years ago. And all of these fires, when you look at all these collective fires that ended up resulting in over 160,000 acres with over 9,000 structures destroyed, 30 fatalities, and so on and so forth. All of these fires started within a 6-hour window because of the heavy winds that were blowing. And simply, we as human beings and fire departments, there's nothing in our arsenal that can put that kind of devastating fire activity and behavior out. We quite literally are at the mercy of Mother Nature at that point, and we have to go ahead and basically focus on just trying to get people out safely and try to save lives. And that's where we're at. This is another fairly messy photo. I apologize about how complex it is. This is the campfire. And the campfire, what this is a fire history map of fire activity that has occurred in this area in approximately the last 50 years. And if you look at all those footprints, look at all the fires that have occurred. You can see in the middle there, the green area. I don't know if I can point to it. Well, I don't think you can see it, but the green area there in the middle, that is the town of Paradise. Of course, we all know what happened to Paradise. The campfire itself is a dark red. If you get a picture of this and look at it, it's the dark red around the perimeter of the fire. But all of these other fires had burned over the last 50 years. So everybody in Paradise knew that they were in a wildfire prone environment, and nobody was surprised when a big fire came burning through. This is a great example. This goes back to the Valley Fire in 2015 in Lake County. But this photograph of the winds shifting down the hills and this picture that's in there that someone took from a shopping center in Middletown shows that arc plume of how rapidly these fires are progressing and moving from place to place. And it's very difficult to get people out safely and things like this. But this is the behavior that we're seeing today. These are all just examples of photos. I actually took all of these photos in 2017 during the Atlas, the Tubbs, the Nuns, all those fires in 2017. So quite devastating to that area. The Valley Fire statistics, going back again, shows all these statistics. It wasn't contained for almost a month. 76,000 acres, 4 fatalities, 4 firefighters burned, almost 2,000 structures destroyed. And so these are the kind of statistics that we're seeing over and over again. This is a dashboard that shows some of the statistics from 2017, and you can see the total number of destroyed structures and all the fires on that map from all over the state. It includes the Thomas Fire down in Ventura and everything in the 10,800 structures destroyed. The North Bay fires themselves, 780 structures destroyed. And if we go through and look at the Thomas Fire in Ventura, 1,066 structures destroyed. But perhaps even more disturbing was the following mudslides that came after. If you recall, the heavy rains that came in January after the Thomas Fire was put out destroyed or damaged 559 structures. And tragically, I believe it was 28 people died from the mudslides alone, not the fire, but the aftermath of the mudslide. So these are all the impacts that we continue to see. So of course, we go back to saying, this is all pretty bad, right? So what do we do about it? How do we combat this? And where's that silver bullet? So I want to look at the prevention factors and say, let's stop talking about suppression. Let's get into the prevention activities. And again, I'm not going to go through a lot of these. These are when I was in the planning and risk analysis department, we were looking at the strategic fire plan, land use planning, collecting data from fire responses, wildland pre-engineering, which is the defensible space inspections and so on and so forth. There's also a whole host of other things that we're doing. The WUI codes, the Wildland Urban Interface Codes, which is Chapter 7A in the California Building Code. California still today is the only state that has a statewide building code for wildfires. There's other states now considering things, but California is the only one that has that. Firewise communities from the National Fire Protection Association. FRAP is the Fire and Resource Assessment Program, which is the science and research wing of CAL FIRE, looking at the fire hazard severity zone mapping, which those maps are currently being updated right now and will be produced. I mean, quite frankly, probably a lot of you know we've been told for quite a while now that they're coming, but we're still waiting for them to get those finished. Cal Mapper, the forest, basically the GIS program that CAL FIRE uses to record and track projects, the VTP-EIR, the Vegetation Treatment Program, Environmental Impact Report, which helps streamline projects to be doing prevention projects and things like that. The Forest Carbon Plan, of course, which is another one of those efforts to try to remove, build a healthier forest to even take more carbon out of the atmosphere and things like that. CAL FIRE has a very robust law enforcement, public education, pre-fire engineering. You can go through all of those lists. And again, there's just an awful lot being done. And when we look at it, there's all these different aspects of prevention that are all over the place, looking at roadside fuel breaks that prevent fires from burning up into communities. The WUI codes, of course, and Public Resource Code 4291, and all of these things that the state has enacted to try to be proactive about that. And public education really works. If we look at some of these examples where people were educated about removing dead and dying material from around their structures and putting a non-combustible zone around their structures. We were talking with this offline before many of you joined, but this is a new code requirement that is coming. It's not in place quite yet. They're still writing the regulatory language, but what we know is having a non-combustible zone approximately 5 feet away from the edge of the house tremendously reduces the risk of a wildfire igniting your structure. So these are some of the changes that will be coming to try to reduce structure ignitions. Just educating people to clean things up, not have flammable materials or articles around structures, and keep them closed so that we can go ahead and resist those ember instructions or ignitions rather. And so of course that's a lot of good work, right? That's a big list, and a lot of people are working really hard on trying to be successful of it. And the question is like, so what does that have to do with any of you, right? Well, the fact is we simply haven't figured it all out yet. And I am back in South Carolina right now, where I was attending at the IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, talking about these prevention efforts. It's one of the leading research facilities studying wildfire impacts in the planet. And so what we know, though, is just simply buying more fire engines and hiring more firefighters is not going to solve this problem. We do need a strong, robust response team, but we've got to get in front of this and start reducing the number of structures from igniting to begin with. And the firefighters on fire engines are not going to solve that problem. We need to understand the science better. And through the IBHS labs here in South Carolina and everything else, we're learning more and more about understanding fire behavior and those impacts on structures. But there's some things that we do know, and that the most predominant factor for homes being destroyed in wildfires are the embers. And we know that from science and research that today, it is widely agreed that between 70 and 90% of every structure that ignites in a wildfire is due to embers. And if you do anything across the board, I don't care what the subject matter is, if you know that the problem of a particular issue, 90% of the problem is one thing, then we probably ought to be focusing our efforts on that one thing. That's a pretty huge number. And we do know also from the damage inspection reports that we've been collecting over the last 5 years, that is now up to, I think the damage inspection list is between 60 and 70,000 structures across the state that has been destroyed in just the last 5 years alone. If a structure ignites during a wildland fire, it only has between a 5 and 10% chance of survival at all, because there aren't enough resources. Once a fire starts, and again, think of the winds that are blowing when those fires start, it's very difficult to put it out. This is actually a picture here at the Scientific Research Center where they blow embers at structures and watch what happens. And we are learning more and more about how those embers are igniting structures. And again, we talked about, well, who's going to be changing this? Everybody. Everybody has to change the way things are done. Architectural and engineering professions about how buildings are designed and what materials are being used and where we place things on the landscape. The construction industry, the environmental issues about smoke impacts and the health issues that come along with that. Elected officials need to get a lot more aggressive at putting regulations and codes in place that are going to help combat this problem. Napa, neighborhood, city, and regional groups, just like yourselves, that are going to play a key role in helping to educate and guide your neighborhoods into a more wildfire safe environment. And as we know, this is a worldwide problem. I mean, 46 million acres burned in Australia 2 years ago. People this summer in the country of Greece were jumping into the Mediterranean to save their lives from fires burning down to the coast. So a lot of things have to change. And then very quickly to summarize and wrap up here, the wildfire assessment report. And again, this is a public document that any of you can go on board. This is just the table of contents. This is what we talked about, the wildfire environment around Beverly Hills because of the topography, the weather, the fuels. The topography has a lot to do with it. As you know, those canyons running north and south. And as you also all know, which direction does the wind come from during Santa Ana's? From the north. And so those alignments of those canyons going north and south exacerbates that problem by fueling those fires and almost acting as a funnel, which will increase the speed and intensity of a fire burning in those canyons. I know that's uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear, but quite literally, that is what fire behavior does. There's nothing you can do to change that, but you can change your environment of your home, your landscaping, and harden it so that it can be less vulnerable to ignitions. So these are all the things that you can look at when you go into that report. I did, again, Travis mentioned that we did some really amazing modeling work, fire modeling. These are just a few of the maps that we provided. The one on the left there shows a potential ignition. We chose an ignition to say, what if a fire started from a vehicle accident or a flat tire of a car traveling on Mulholland Drive? And in those particular scenarios of maybe a 20-mile-an-hour wind, the flames were actually reaching the northern edge of the Truesdale Estates in Beverly Hills in approximately 12 minutes. That's how fast this would move. And that's only with about a 20-mile-an-hour wind speed. And we all know that Santa Ana's can burn a lot faster than that. The map on the right shows some two different things. It shows the spread influence, the factors that are influencing how a fire will spread across the landscape, and also with what intensity it'll spread. So we combine those two models to show the highest vulnerabilities of where fire intensity and spread might occur in these neighborhoods. We also looked at where the vulnerability was from structures, and also how that vulnerability from landscape and things on the trees along the streets and the vegetation on people's properties would affect evacuation routes.
Yeah, Dave,
All of this information.
we got a question in here. I think it was a slide back, just this, because I want to take a little time to look at these. Chuck McGinnis had his hand up, and I just wanted to start that conversation a little bit. So
Yeah,
we can
and we
focus
can,
in on them.
because if I go forward, that was the last slide. Actually.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
So we can
Let's-
go back.
Yeah, let's start with that slide there. Yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And let's see, I'm listening from two different ends, but Travis, you hit a home run. You've done an excellent job as far as presenting everything, and I greatly appreciate the thoroughness, David, that you have in going through everything.
Thank you.
Great job, and I really appreciate it. The reason I raised my hand, though, is that there's a structure fire, ironically, at 10768 Bellagio Road in Bel Air. And everybody should be aware of that, particularly those who live in Bel Air. And I don't know exactly where that is. Maureen, maybe you know. I don't know.
Is that happening right now?
It is. I just got it on Ring.
All right, so real
Or
time.
Citizen, rather. I'm sorry. I got it on Citizen.
Chuck, what's that address again?
The address is 10768 Bellagio Road. It's a structure fire, and it's in the area of 37,
It's
which is
got to
on
be
Veteran.
on the west side of Bel Air,
It is. It's by
probably
the
up
west
by
gate.
around Linda Flora.
We have units from 19 and 37 on site now. It's they're containing it.
Okay,
Thanks,
good.
Phil.
Okay, I don't know where it stands. I'm just listening to it on the other thing. But anyway, that's the reason I interrupted. I didn't mean to interrupt, David. And hey, you gave some fabulous information. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And like I said, I could talk about this for a long time. You can probably tell I don't have much passion for this stuff, but this is really important to me, to try to help people understand what their risks are and what steps they can take to help reduce those risks. Now, these maps are just pictures of the maps, but please, if you're interested at all, number one, I'll have this presentation available for you to look in more detail and study it a little better. But in addition, because this study and the wildfire assessment is actually available online, there is a much better detailed information and description of what these maps are, every one of them, one by one. There's a total of 9 maps that are in the report. And we go into a great deal of detail describing exactly what they are, how we derive the information, and what use they'll play in planning for better fire prevention projects in the city of Beverly Hills. And that's really the whole goal, is to recognize, where is the highest vulnerability? And then what steps do you take to start reducing that vulnerability? And again, those are the focused aspects that we wanted to look at. It was very important for us with the mayor and the city council and the fire chief to really look at the evacuation routes and where are the biggest choke points, where if people were going to be getting out, what are the highest likelihood of trees falling or the vegetation that's there burning at such an intensity that people couldn't move through the streets. So all of these things are playing into a very aggressive plan that the city of Beverly Hills is taking on now to go ahead and start reducing these vulnerabilities in their city. So I'm really proud that I had a chance to help them with that. I think that we did the mapping itself was done by a company called Flame Mapper. I didn't do them myself, I will fully admit. I'm not a model or researchers. I understand it enough to be able to translate it into what do we do with this information. but I'm not the modeling genius behind all this GIS work.
Okay, well, perfect. So we have a question here from Ron Cornell. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, yes. My question is, it concerns thermal cameras with an AI component. And
Yes.
I understand that the Napa Vintners Association has employed a company to do thermal cameras with an AI component. And I'm very interested in this. I tried to contact people up there, and I thought I had the name of the company, but apparently they didn't either answer me for whatever reason, or but since you're up there and you know about this,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that this type of process, having thermal cameras with an AI component tied into the fire department, is the wave of the future in detecting these things. Because as you said, you know, once these things get going, there's basically nothing that stops them.
Mhm.
So if we can stop it early enough, then we'll be okay. And we have, in our area, we have station 109, we got station 99. They're right up along the Mulholland corridor, and these people respond right away. They're terrific. But if they're not notified,
Right.
you know, nothing happens. So if you could expand on that, or send out through Travis the contact point, because I think that our NCEP committee should investigate this, and I'd like to propose this as a motion before a committee. And I know that maybe this is not the right opportune time, but I really think that this is one of the biggest projects that we should be undertaking. Back to you, David.
No, you're exactly right. Early detection is a really critical factor in being able to understand, and it's not just the early detection. If you think about the technology that is available today with detecting where a fire starts, and then having that pinpoint location tied in with AI data that has the exact current weather data that is going on at that spot at any given moment, the fuels, the topography, all of those factors that are already built into it, even assessors data where structures are and where people are living, you can very, very rapidly start putting together some projection models of where that fire might be going, how fast it might be getting there, where you need to focus your efforts for evacuation things, and all of those kind of things. So those are all brand new sort of factors that are coming along. In Napa, you're exactly right. We have 3 cameras in Napa. They want to put more, but the county of Napa has actually just issued an RFP. I don't know when it's due, maybe next week or something like that, that is asking for there to even be a more robust view of how this is all going to fit together and look at other options. It might be drones in the air, it might be satellite technology. There's a whole lot of options that are out there, and Napa is very aggressively studying all of those factors and is will be hiring some company to go ahead and do some analysis to get better early detection and predictive analysis for those fire areas. So I can easily get I'll send Travis the email with the company that is doing that. I think it's Illumination Systems or something, but I'll send it to Travis and he can distribute it. I see another hand up.
Yeah, Maureen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting. I want to direct more about protecting our homes. We're painting our house, but we're going to install these baffle vents, these vents that baffle embers and flames. And so I was wondering if any research has been done from the contacts that you have on it before we spend the money to do it. Also, I have a concern. I have a property across the street from us that has bamboo trees. And every
Mhm.
time the wind blows, I get all the dead leaves in my property. And then I have now the radar's up about eucalyptus trees. We have a mature eucalyptus tree on another neighbor's property. I love trees, but I was just wondering what you thought. I mean, how can I, or should we be very concerned about these types of trees that are in our areas?
Sure. I'll start with the vents. And so the vents that you're talking about are very effective. There has been an enormous amount of study and research done on them. The code for the Wildland Urban Interface Code, Chapter 7A in the State Building Code, requires vents that have a maximum of a 1/8 inch screen on them. But even with a 1/8 inch screen, some embers can still get through. So there's technology of even better vents that, like you said, have the baffles where it almost forms this circuitous path that embers have to go through. And they're very, very effective in cutting off almost 100% of ember intrusion. There's also vents that are being made that once it's exposed to any kind of heat, the material in the vent basically swells up and closes it off so that no embers can get in at all. There's companies called Vulcan and others that offer a number of different products that have proven in the testing and research labs to be very, very effective in either totally eliminating or greatly reducing the amount of ember intrusion into concealed spaces in homes. So yes, that's a very, very important step to take.
So
And I highly recommend you do that.
Yeah, the brand that we're using, and not to, people make their own decision, it's called Brand Guard.
Oh yes, Brand Guard. Yeah, they're another very highly reputable company that has a very good product. So yes, there's a number of companies that make some very, very good vents. Brand Guard is one of the top brands. So yeah, I think you've got a good product there.
And I have a brochure if anyone wants to email me and want it. So, yeah.
Sure. And as far as the trees go, yeah, we can love our trees to death and have too many of them. As I showed in those pictures, the fact is the number of trees that exist on the landscape today would never be here if Mother Nature had her way and kind of kept things calmed down, I guess, or reduced because of normal routine fires that would have burned more periodically. Eucalyptus are problematic, especially in large groves, because they are very highly oily. They have a very high oil content to them. So when they do get burning, they burn very, very hot. And they also, as you know, have a lot of, those kind of drippy leaves and the bark that, kind of peels off and things like that. So those can create a lot of ember brands that then can be blown to start other spot fires and other fires and things like that. So eucalyptus are problematic. Certainly bamboo and all the vegetation and the debris that those cause. The bamboo itself typically tends to be a higher moisture content plant. And so it's a little more fire resilient, but when they drop their leaves, they're very, very dry and flammable. So it's kind of a catch-22. It is a maintenance issue that just simply has to be kept up. And what we recommend, neighbors talk to neighbors, work out some kind of an agreement. How can we, reduce the risk to both of our places and things like that. And so those are just issues that we all have to start paying a lot more attention to. But good luck with all of that. I think, I wish you well with all of that.
And maybe to follow up, and Stephen, I'll get to you next. We have Randy Simon, who's I think one of our neighbors from Beverly Hills, has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, and hi, everybody. Hi, David.
Hello.
Just some quick background. I'm in Truesdale, and we have a lot of neighbors who got really scared about fires. You were reciting statistics earlier about how all these recent destructive wildfires are occurring. And I've tried to be having a proper perspective on it as a resident of a community like Beverly Hills, surrounded by communities like where everybody is on this call, we're not in those Northern California, I don't know what to call it, forest communities where they have these
Right.
huge fires.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people are hearing that stuff and going, oh my gosh, I've heard talk in Truesdale here from some people saying there's fire could come through here that could consume an area the size of 3 football fields every minute. And within minutes, not only is our whole hillside going to be on fire, but the flats and downtown Beverly Hills. And it's really kind of hysteria because I don't think we have the same topography, et cetera. And the chances of a fire like that they would have, let's say in Paradise, is going to happen here in Beverly Hills. But what has happened is the city and our neighborhood in particular, there are some people who just want all the trees out. They want better views, or and there's realtors, there's a financial incentive. And they actually got the city council to approve a plan, which I'm sure you're aware of, where they were going to take out 1,200 trees in a relatively small part of Beverly Hills north of Sunset. And then there was a big community uproar that stopped it. And then you were called in and you did a flame mapper study. And the new number that came out was that less than 100 trees had to be removed. And again, a lot of people were like, oh, that's great. It's a lot better than 1,200. Problem is, my wife and I drove up and down the streets that the fire department is focusing on taking out these 100 trees or up to 100 trees. There's only 400 trees on those streets. So if 400 trees get taken out, that's 1 out of every 4 trees. And these are large, healthy. We have a great arborist. He, all the trees are in great shape. They were recently trimmed heavily, so they're not carrying a lot of excess stuff. And then actually your maps were focusing on the upper parts of our Truesdale neighborhood. So if it's 100 trees out of 400, but they're all pretty much near the top, that means 1 out of every 2 or 2 out of every 3 trees are going to go. And so a lot of the neighbors are very upset about this, even though it's a lot better than 1,200 trees. But I've been talking to the fire chief, et cetera, as recently as yesterday. And from your maps, it's not clear whether, when you have red markings, if that's trees or brush. And of course, we have no objection to brush clearance, but we're trying to save our healthy, mature trees and the tree-lined character of our neighborhood. And I don't know, I'm hoping to talk to you tomorrow one-on-one, but
Yeah.
Trying to help this situation because we don't want to lose all these trees under the threat of this might happen, but actually it's probably not going to happen because our topography is a lot different than some of these big fires you're talking about.
In some ways, you're correct. There are some, clearly there's some differences between Northern and Southern California, but we don't have to go back very far and see some of the catastrophic natures of the Thomas Fire or the Woolsey Fire, the Getty Fire just from 2019. There's a lot of examples. And of course, you can go back and look at the massive fire sieges in 2003 and 2007. So it happens. We do have that kind of thing. And you're right. I mean, the reaction, let me back up. The tree issue in Beverly Hills was, it kind of got sideways a little bit. And you're exactly right. They asked me to come in because when I was hearing about the problem initially, my one question to them was like, I'm hearing all the conversation about the trees and I'm not hearing one word about anybody talking about the structures and the potential impact of the structures themselves. And so you're right, when we're showing that the vegetation changes along those roadways, it is vegetation as a whole, not just trees. But I also think that we have to kind of look at this from a long-term perspective. The canary pines, which are the traditional tree that was planted when Truesdale was built and developed, a lot of those trees are now reaching their maturity, if not, reaching the end of their lifespan. Canary pines as a species is not a long-lasting tree. They don't last for hundreds of years or anything else like that. They're certainly not redwoods or sequoias or anything like that. And they have a fairly short lifespan. And no matter how we think of them or what we want to happen, the reality is that within the next couple of decades, most of those trees are going to be at the end of their lifespan. And I think that it is really imperative for the city of Beverly Hills to have a replacement plan in place when those trees, as they start dying, because they will. There's nothing else you can do about it. And so I would like to hope that the plan that they've put in place is helping people understand the fact that, no, we don't necessarily have to take them all out right now. But the fact is that we do have to start looking at that replacement plan with a fairly aggressive replacement plan in place, so that as those trees do start dying in the not too distant future, we'll have a plan in place to start how to replace them with similar plants, different plants, whatever the case may be. You're right, the arborist there in the city is wonderful. And we had a lot of really great discussions on talking about how that plan might look and what that replacement plan is going to be and what type of species might be. But this is all about changing the landscape into a more fire resilient landscape. I think it's a safe statement to make that when those communities were first developed, up in those hills, the landscaping that was done as part of that development, quite frankly, I can probably guarantee you that no conversation took place about the fire resiliency of their decisions as to what we're making. And so here we are in a heightened, more critical fire behavior environment that has evolved over the last several decades, and it's only going to continue to get worse. And we're straddling that with a landscape of vegetation that by default is going to have to get replaced in the not too distant future. So how do we roll that all into a big plan? And that's the effort that the city is trying to take.
Right. So many of our developments here, I'm thinking maybe Bel Air Ridge and places like that are probably aggressively looking at these kinds of questions of how to deal with the landscape over time and transition it into something that's much more fire resilient.
Can I answer? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Randy, we're going to move on if that's okay. Steve Weinberg, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, David, for the presentation. It was really informative. Especially when you put up those maps right at the end, I put on my glasses and I came in really close. It turns out my house is like right in the middle of that red zone. Okay, I'm in Midway Coldwater Canyon, right across from Franklin Canyon, which is basically a park and it's uninhabited. And we think that if that thing catches fire, it's going to be nuts around here. Anyways, I started thinking again, and every year around this time around fire season, I think about what am I going to do when something like that happens? And my house happens to be on a flag lot, somewhat up on the canyon side, on the eastern canyon side, and it's really, really narrow to get to my house. And I'm thinking there's no fire equipment that's going to come up to my house. So I thought of some self-help kinds of things, and I wanted to get your feedback on them. One of them is a device that you stick one end in your swimming pool, and it's basically a lawnmower kind of, Honda engine with a fire hose connected to it. And every year I think, you know what, this is the year I'm going to get something like that. And just in case anything happens, at least I'm prepared. What is your experience with those sorts of things? Is that more dangerous than it sounds? I mean, am I putting myself and my neighbors' lives in danger if we're trying to do something to help the fire department to keep from flames spreading to further structures? Or do we get out of here? I mean, just no matter what, we just get out. So I just want your feedback on something like that.
Right. I think that those kind of auxiliary devices that firefighters could use fairly effectively, because now you're providing them with additional water sources that they could specifically use for helping to protect your home. I think there's some real value in being able to provide that kind of a system. My recommendation, when the fire department issues an evacuation order and asks people to leave, they're not doing that lightly with, those are very calculated decisions. And it is safer for you and them if everybody leaves as quickly and as safely as possible. Because like it or not, when life safety comes to bad, and I have to admit, I've been in situations like this before where people chose not to leave, but then the fire overwhelmed them and now they couldn't get out. And we will do everything in our power to try to go help save people and get them out. But now not only are you at a higher risk, you're now putting the fire crews at a higher risk because now they have to go help protect you. So my recommendation to everybody is that please, if you get an evacuation warning, get out. What I want to recommend is that these are the elements of things to start thinking about: your landscaping, your structural hardening, and doing all the factors that you can possibly do to try to reduce the vulnerability of your house from igniting from the wildfire to begin with. If you really focus on what steps you can take and start dealing with those kind of things, you're really going to be having a chance to reduce that vulnerability aspect and reduce the likelihood that the house will ignite. Those are the steps that we ought to be thinking more of about, and instead of what do I do when the ignition occurs? Let's get away from that thought. Let's start putting our effort into, now before the ignition occurs, and start working on the things that we have the ability to do, which is the built environment. I mean, we can't control the weather. We can't control the topography, but we can control the structure, the materials, the vegetation, the landscaping. We have the ability to make choices and control those factors. And again, we're learning more and more about what steps those would be most effectively around individual pieces of property. And I would like to strongly encourage everybody to start working on that. This is a huge problem. Yeah. It's been originating over a long time, and we're not going to solve it overnight. None of you are going to suddenly wave a magic wand and everything's going to be perfect tomorrow. That's not going to happen for anyone, but we have to start someplace. So I encourage everybody to take those steps, and please evacuate when you're asked to evacuate.
So to follow directly up on that, I've got a couple of written questions that have come in. And the first one is, what are your thoughts about the effectiveness of a sprinkler on the roof?
There is a lot of information, a lot of conversation going on about that. We do not have a lot of scientific evidence of knowing exactly what, where, how, and why to do it. But I can tell you unequivocally that there is some value to it at times. And here's where I say at times. Sprinklers on roofs, if it's being supplied by a private water source, is a very good thing to do. One of the things that we've witnessed in a lot of these large devastating fires, regardless of where they are, is that the municipal water system begins to fail very, very quickly. That has happened in virtually all the big fires for a number of reasons. One, you have a lot of emergency equipment all coming in, plugging into the fire hydrants and sucking water out of the hydrants. Number two, the unfortunate part is that when you get hundreds and even thousands of structures that are now starting to burn and be destroyed, there's a water supply line to every single one of those buildings, and the water supply systems do not have an automatic shutoff valve that stops the water flow when the building is being destroyed, and therefore we just have water starting to flow, and the systems start failing even faster. If you put a sprinkler up on your roof, I'm just going to say it, that starts causing the water supply to dwindle even faster. And the fact is, we know that there are some value to it. We've actually witnessed some improvements, and there's a lot of companies out there who are selling products like that. And there is some value to it, but we don't know exactly how or why. The research has not been done to tell you where that sprinkler on your roof is going to provide the best effectiveness, how much water it should apply, when you should turn it on, before or after the fire, or shut it off after the fire leaves. There's a lot of factors that we don't know about yet. We think that if you had sprinkler systems, that the environment would maybe lower the temperatures, increase the humidity, and therefore change the fire behavior when it starts hitting those changed conditions. But once again, you're contributing also to the reduction of water supply that the firefighters desperately need, and things like that. So it's a very, very complex issue. The simple answer is that yes, they work. They kind of, at times, they might work if everything is perfect, but they don't guarantee. We have many examples of homes that had those sprinklers, even with private water supplies, and we know the sprinklers activated, but the house was completely lost, despite all of those best efforts. So there's no guarantee that that's going to work. Again, I go back to the simple things. Deal with the landscaping, deal with your building materials, the vents, your roof, all of those kind of things first. And then if a water supply can be brought on later, maybe that's the icing on the cake. But if you don't do all of those other things first, the sprinklers aren't going to save your house.
So on those lines, we have Elizabeth in the question and answer saying, our structure has non-combustible siding, trim, and roof material, but it says burning, but I think it's burning eucalyptus 50 feet from my house would be so hot the house would ignite, no need for embers. So what is the distance that the heat from the burning eucalyptus, for example, can ignite a structure without embers? That's like Jack Cohen's work, right?
Yeah, that's Jack Cohen's work.
Yep.
You know, there's a couple of things I'll say about that. Number one is that we don't know the distance. In fact, the test burn that we did tonight here at IBHS is the beginning stages of starting to study what that distance should be between structures or vegetation and things like that. So we don't have a good feel yet for what that distance should be. But I would add this as a caveat. In a lot of these fires, what we're learning is that most of the vegetation, especially large trees like that, they're not the element that ignites first and then ignites the house. It's the other way around. Most of the damage to large trees, and you'll see this in Paradise and all these other big fires, the houses ignite, and the radiant heat from the house itself is what starts burning the trees and the surrounding landscape. We've seen that over and over. I've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times. So I would think that you have less to worry about the trees themselves igniting your house than the embers that are going to get into your, into your eaves and things like that. You said you've got non-combustible everything. So I would go back and say, all right, how's your landscaping look around your house? Is it vulnerable to ignition and therefore igniting the house and things like that? So those are, again, the things you should look at, but you have less of a concern of that eucalyptus tree burning. They do burn hot, but I would, I haven't seen that many trees be the ignition factor to the homes themselves. It's the embers that are igniting things, not necessarily the trees. So,
okay. And Nikki, I'm going to get you in a second. I saw that Joan Herman has had her, and then we'll take Nikki and then Kathy Wayne.
Thanks, Travis, and thanks for a wonderful presentation. I want to go back to this issue of tree removal.
mm-hmm.
So we, like a lot of other neighborhoods, I'm in Bel Air Ridge, planted too many pines, and they look wonderful.
Yes.
And they're and they're too close together, and everything else, and they're very expensive to take down.
Yes.
So my question is, based on your earlier comments, are we better off like waiting for them to outlive their lives? Or should we be investing in, trimming and removal to get the horizontal and vertical spacing that we're told we need?
Mm-hmm. I think that, right off the bat, it's hard for me to state one way or the other without knowing the specific property that you're looking at and where the tree exists on the landscape and next to the house and things like that. I would need to have a little more information about those kinds of things in order to answer. But the answer about trimming and thinning is very important. And I have to say, Beverly Hills is actually being very aggressive at getting in and doing a very, very effective job at thinning and trimming the trees that are there. That's going to do two things. It's going to, one, make them healthier so that they'll drop fewer pine needles. And number two, it's going to make them less dense so that when fire does come through, it has less of an impact of that proximity of fire just traveling through the canopy, because now you've broken it up and it makes fire have to work a lot harder to do that. So the trimming and thinning of trees, I think, is a very effective and important step that you can take. And clearly it's a lot cheaper than taking a tree down entirely also. So those would be recommendations that I would suggest for you.
Thanks, David. That's very helpful.
Okay, Nikki Miner, then Kathy Wayne.
Okay. Hi, thank you for such valuable educational information. I was thinking as you and the other gentleman were speaking that, of course, it's much different that trees die off naturally than to purposefully go and cut them down. And you've substantiated that with a lot of what you've been saying, and in particular just now about the structures need to be hardened and so on, because they'll burn before the trees. And then I think to myself, well, then why cut these healthy trees down? And I think that the people who are so panicked about this in Beverly Hills really would benefit from the kind of an education you've been giving us here about how to harden their homes and how to do this and how to do that. And, and not to think about, oh, the problems are going to be solved if we just cut down the trees. And another reason that we in Benedict Canyon and the people in Coldwater Canyon are very nervous about this is because trees are an important part of our ecology, of things that we depend on that come from the aura of trees. And the more you cut down, the more we're in a cement, city of some sort in the hills. And, so it's very important from many, many aspects for these trees not to be recommended to be cut down. Have the arborist, as you just explained, take care of all these trees, and then everything will be healthy and happy, and there won't be this that disastrous result of a panic.
Yeah, and I appreciate those comments. I would say I would like people to start thinking more in terms of, and Beverly Hills, I did a lot of work with them on this report and things, and they're not, it's not a tree removal plan. It's a tree replacement plan that as trees need to be replaced, that you do get trees replaced. And things like that. So you're exactly right. There is a huge value and benefit, and trees are, we need them. They're a very valuable part of the landscape. And there's, Beverly Hills has given no indication of any kind whatsoever. I probably shouldn't be speaking for them. I'm not going to speak for them. But of course, they have no agenda to take trees out wholeheartedly. It's about changing the landscape and replacing them with both a more fire resilient type of tree, as well as reducing the density of it in places so that fire doesn't have an opportunity to burn freely through the canopy of trees. Because once a canopy fire starts burning, then you're in big trouble. And one of the biggest issues was about the evacuation issues. We want to see where are the highest vulnerabilities for people to evacuate safely. And we need to focus on those factors to make sure that we've provided a safe path of egress for people to get out. And so those are some of the determining factors that are being used to make decisions on what steps to take.
Great. Kathy Wayne, I also have your question by text. Do you want to ask it?
If you would like to, that would be terrific. It has been a amazing presentation. So I just wanted to say that, but I also have a question. If you want to read it, that would be great too.
Yeah, and let me do that and also wrap it up into another thing that we were talking about before the meeting was just started based on the conference that you're at. So the question here was, can you elaborate on house hardening? Do metal shutters work? Is there a paint or coating that helps? And then bigger than that, we have many people in the hills here who are experiencing either large increases in premiums for their homeowners insurance, or getting denied and dropped and having to shop around. And how does home hardening relate to that? And what's coming relative to insurance, and what can people do who are trying to get insurance? How does this work? Because you get to feeling a little, and I've seen this as we were discussing, people get to feel a little hopeless and powerless when it comes to, a home that they've lived in for 30 years and now their insurance companies drop them, or they've got to double their cost or whatnot. So home hardening, specifically paints and metal shutters, and where we're headed.
Sure, those are all really good questions, and there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
So let's try to unpack it all here real quickly. So as far as hardening your home, I know that's a term that maybe a lot of people don't really fully understand. What does that mean? Literally, it means, I had a couple of photos in this presentation that show all those embers just bombarding a house. And what we want to do is we want to lock that house down so that when those embers hit, they cannot find an ignition source. They either bounce off or they go out, but they don't find a way to penetrate cracks or openings in joints. The biggest vulnerabilities are where you have horizontal and vertical surfaces that come together. So for example, if you have a roof that goes into a second floor, or a dormer on a roof, or things like that, those joints become very, very critical in how they're designed and dealt with. The joint of the ground of, how, if you have any kind of a combustible siding, or even siding in general should be a certain distance. They're going to recommend 6 inches minimum of a non-combustible vertical joint between the ground and any siding, all those kind of things. Don't stack anything underneath your decks. There shouldn't be any kind of, they're not storage places. There shouldn't be anything underneath your deck that could ignite and then start igniting your deck. It's all of these factors that are coming into play, and the insurance industry is starting to understand all of those factors in a much more aggressive manner that is going to change the system wholeheartedly over the next few years. Now, let me just explain to you that the insurance industry kind of caught off guard here. They witnessed a lot of losses in 2017 when all the wine country fires hit up in Napa and Sonoma and things like that. There was billions of dollars of losses. But quite frankly, they thought that it was sort of a blip on the radar screen. They didn't think that it was going to be a normal event every year. And so when 2018 hit and the Camp Fire destroyed Paradise and other fires came right on the heels of that, this is the exact same position that the insurance industry went through back in the 1990s when Hurricane Andrew hit Florida and destroyed Homestead. If you remember that episode that, if anybody remembers Hurricane Andrew destroying Homestead, Florida, the insurance industry went through the same traumatic reassessment of how do we deal better with hurricanes and the losses from hurricanes and the hardening structures to better resist wind from taking the roofs off and doing things like that. If you fast forward to today, the fortified system that is designed and by and encouraged and recognized by the insurance industry has dramatically reduced the amount of storm damage to homes that were built with that standard. they had to go through a traumatic reassessment of everything they knew about insuring for wind events and hurricanes. And everybody in Florida and the Gulf Coast and every place else kind of went through the same trauma that we're going through now with the insurance industry and learning about wildfires. And that's exactly where we are. They are learning. They're learning very, very rapidly. And this whole effort that I'm involved with out here of trying to come up with that list of elements that people could do to harden their homes from those kind of things. And by the way, yes, metal shutters closing off windows, absolutely. We there's a lot of conversation about how could that be designed more normally and on all homes so that maybe windows are closed off. I mean, they do that for hurricanes because they know the hurricanes are coming several days in advance. Well, we don't often have that kind of time and luxury when a wildfire hits. So would there be an opportunity to have an automatic shutter that could close electronically? Maybe. So those are all design elements and ideas that a lot of architect friends of mine that are thinking about and putting on homes and all those kind of things. So yes, those kind of things can work, and the insurance industry is very rapidly approaching a time where if you have an established list of elements that you can prove and check off and say, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, then that's going to give them a lot better comfort level in how they can go ahead and insure that property. It also gets to be a much bigger picture about the regulatory requirements that insurance companies have to fall under from the Department of Insurance. So the commissioner, the insurance commissioner, Laura, here in California, is regulating what insurance companies can and can't do. So as the insurance companies insurance rates for themselves, they have insurance too. Keep in mind the fact that there are large global companies called reinsurers like Lloyd's of London and Aon and Munich Re and these big global companies that insure insurance companies. And the insurance companies aren't allowed to take those losses of their insurance rates and apply them to homeowners' costs, because that's the law here in California. The insurance commissioner's office has not been willing to allow them to incorporate those reinsurance costs into insurance policies. But because their reinsurance rates have skyrocketed because of all the losses, then they can't reabsorb those costs. And that's why, as a business model, they have to reduce their risk and reduce the number of people that they're covering, because they can't absorb the loss of all those other things that they're not allowed to do. So trust me, it's a very, very complex issue. But what I can tell you is that the insurance industry is learning very quickly about what steps those should be, the technology, the research, the science, about understanding what those factors are and being able to model and look at people doing the right thing, and not just at the parcel level, but across an entire community. Because if you think about if you do everything that you possibly can do and none of your neighbors take those same steps, you really haven't reduced your risk. Your neighbors are still threatening you. And so it's important that the entire neighborhood jump on board this and everybody participate in reducing the risk of the overall neighborhood. And I'm just going to be very, very optimistic here and tell all of you that I am convinced that at some point in time in the future, we're going to figure all this out, and we're going to get people to jump on board and start doing the home hardening aspects, and fires will continue to burn. That's a given. It's a natural part of the landscape. They'll simply continue to burn. But when they burn through the communities, the structures are not going to ignite like they do today. We're going to see a lot more structures successfully survive wildfire impacts as it burns through communities. I really think that that is exactly what we can do. We will engineer our way out of this problem, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And
So Dave, in interest of your time, because I know we're already here at 8:30 and you're on East Coast time.
yeah,
If
I have a plane to catch in the morning. So
okay, all right. So I would let you go, but I've just got can we do a real quick lightning round here? Just real quick answers. Are there tents that you can use to limit smoke damage or something that can limit smoke damage during a fire?
I don't know of any product that I've heard of that can prevent the smoke damage. When you say a tent, I'm guessing
like
that
a
you mean
termite
like
tent or something. Okay.
tinting the house.
All right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
next one, the companies that come out and put foam on your house, does that work? Is it effective?
It can be. But once again, those foam products are only effective if you've done everything else. They can't guarantee that your house is going to survive if you haven't taken all the other steps with it.
Perfect. And also, are there any coatings that you can put on like a wood fence or even paint on a house that will reduce flammability?
There are some paints and they're called intumescent paints. That's the technical term. And it's a paint covering that when exposed to heat, basically bubbles up and provides a more effective preventive coating. They do exist. They're not cheap. And I don't know what the longevity of those things are. But I do want to point out one more thing. You said fences, and we haven't talked about fences.
Yeah.
Wood fences connected to homes are also one of the biggest contributing factors for home ignitions. Because once a fence starts burning, it's like a candle wick, and it's going to take the fire straight to the house. And we have seen this. We've captured a lot of data on many, many, many structures that were destroyed and burned down because the fence burning ignited the house. So if you've got a wood fence attached to your home, consider replacing about a 5-foot section of it, probably minimum, maybe even more, with a non-combustible material of some sort that can still be a fencing product, but it's not flammable. So that as that wooden fence starts burning, when it hits that non-flammable joint between your wooden fence and the house, it can't carry the fire to it. And that will help reduce your vulnerability also.
Okay, we're almost there. Can you repeat the percentage of houses that burn because of embers blowing in from fire front versus percentage from eucalyptus or pine trees growing near the house? And to confirm that you said that it's the burning houses that set the adjacent trees on fire, not the trees setting the houses on fire.
Typically. Now,
okay.
It's about 90% of all the structures that ignite in a wildfire are due to embers, either directly or indirectly. The embers either start some piece of the structure on fire, which then burns the house down, or it ignites, say, vegetation or landscaping right around it, or something on the deck that then ignites the house and starts burning it down. So it's the embers that are causing the ignitions. If your house is in an area where there is a lot of trees next to it and all those trees start burning, absolutely, there are conditions where trees could ignite the structure. But that's more the exception than the rule. And especially if you've taken the effort to start removing that vegetation and those excess, heavy numbers of trees right up against a house, if you just simply start clearing those out and removing them, then you're going to dramatically reduce the risk of that vegetation igniting your structure.
Thank you. And the last one we'll wrap with this because it's a great, interesting question and let you get on your evening. Someone asked, am I wrong to think that tiki torches are dangerous in the hillside? My neighbor had a tiki torch on the hillside. I checked with our fire station. The captain came to check them and told me they weren't dangerous.
Well, typically, especially if they're placed in an area where there's maybe in a rock bed or something where there's, they don't typically put off embers. They're just burning fuel. And it is a flame. Now, if it got knocked over into something flammable, then yes, things like that. But typically, I have to say, I don't know I've heard very many, if ever, of a fire being caused by a tiki torch. I'm sure it's happened, but I'm not, it's probably not a big concern overall, but you do have to be careful about it because it's open flame.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be smart about where it is and what the weather conditions are. If the winds started coming up, I would put it out and things like that. But on a typical normal day, and it's being dealt with appropriately with a non-combustible surface under it and things like that, it should be okay.
Wonderful. Let's thank you so much. You can't get the hearty round of applause you would get if you were in person. But believe me
That's
when I
okay.
say how appreciative we are of your time, your expertise, your service to the state, and your continued advocacy. I think on behalf of people who are trying to solve this issue. So thank you so much, David. And I'll post your slides on the minutes for the meeting and any of those other things that we can communicate back out to the group.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. So feel free to drop off now. We're going to talk a little bit more for those
Okay.
who want to stick around. But just want to close this part of our conversation and wish you a great travel back to California.
Great. I will, if I leave, is that going to not?
That's
bother
fine.
your brain?
You're all set.
Okay.